The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Confederation stood like a cathedral, suspended in the heart of deep space. Towering walls of polished obsidian shimmered under ambient starlight, broken only by the endless flicker of holographic displays that pulsed with information in every known language. Each display cast a cold blue hue across the chamber, illuminating the faces, or the equivalents, of the most influential beings in the known galaxy. They sat in rows of elevated hover podiums, encircling a grand central stage. Some were scaled, others crystalline, gelatinous, or even biomechanical in nature. Each one, regardless of form, represented a civilization that spanned entire star systems. This was the height of political and military authority in the galaxy. Standing at the central podium was Supreme Commander Cora Nexus, a name that carried both reverence and fear across hundreds of light years. Her crystallized exoskeleton refracted light in an ever-shifting pattern of vibrant hues, prismatic armor that dazzled and intimidated in equal measure. 4 upper appendages moved with trained elegance, each gesture punctuated with precision. She was the embodiment of control, grace, and command. "Members of the High Council," she began, her voice modulated to a perfect blend of cold authority and casual disdain, "we gather today to address the categorization of another species on the Outer Rim, the humans of Earth." A murmur swept through the chamber. Not surprise, amusement. Several delegates didn't bother hiding their smirks, their bioluminescent skins pulsing in rhythmic patterns that denoted laughter in their species. Earth. The primitive blue planet, whose inhabitants fought over imaginary lines and spilled blood for shiny rocks. Even mentioning their name in such an august chamber felt like a waste of protocol. Grand Archon, Tix Brightheart, a coiled serpentine figure with eyes like polished amber, slowly unwound part of his body from his hover throne. His tongue flicked once, signaling mild interest. "Supreme Commander," he said, his voice dry with boredom. "Surely the Classification Bureau can handle such trifles. Why waste the Council's time?" Cora allowed herself a calculated smile, small, controlled, but sharp. "Normally, yes. However, this particular case offers an opportunity for reflection." She flicked a hand, and a large holographic projection of Earth appeared above the council floor, slowly rotating in space. Red markers bloomed across its surface, hotspots of conflict, famine, pollution, and political unrest. The humans have achieved rudimentary spaceflight. They've even split the atom. But they still engage in internecine warfare over borders, fossil fuels, and religious ideologies. Their potential is contradicted by their pettiness, she said. "Charming," High Minister Vex Starweaver muttered. His gelatinous form rippled like liquid mercury in amusement. "They haven't even unified their species. Not even close. Category 7, at best." "I agree," Cora said, nodding. "Their development is wildly inconsistent. Nuclear power and internet networks, but no moon colonization. They have global communications, yet still depend on physical currency. Their military is fragmented, their societies divided, and yet they survive, thrive even." Admiral Rex Shadowblade, commander of the Confederation's Third Fleet, leaned forward slightly. His cybernetic eye spun and zoomed in on the Earth hologram, focusing on industrial regions and missile silos. "Are they of any use to us? Perhaps as a resource world?" "Indeed," Cora replied, manipulating the display. Layers of Earth peeled away, revealing geological richness, uranium, rare earth elements, fossil fuels. Their oceans are nearly untapped, and their labor force is resilient. "Manual workers, then?" asked Zara Quicksilver, her chrome-plated arms folded. "Give them basic tools, some indoctrination, and maybe they'll grow past mud huts." Cora's smile widened ever so slightly. "An excellent suggestion. Their physiology is surprisingly adaptable. high pain tolerance, capable of working in diverse environments. They might even benefit from exposure to real civilization. What of communication? Grand Archon Tix asked, still disinterested. Any signs of advanced contact attempts? None, Cora said with a dismissive flick of a hand. They're still relying on radio waves and basic digital signals. Their encryption is simplistic, almost charming. As far as they're concerned, they're alone. The laughter that followed was a chorus of derision. Booming chortles, flickering lights, rippling forms. The idea that a species so self-assured could be so blind amused them all. Should we even bother with first contact protocols? Vex asked, barely suppressing a grin. We must maintain standards, Cora answered with mock gravity. But nothing elaborate. A basic scout fleet should suffice. Their detection systems are laughably outdated. We'll collect data, formally classify them as Category 7, and begin resource acquisition planning. Agreed, Admiral Shadowblade rumbled. But perhaps a few warships? Just in case. Primitive species can be erratic. Cora laughed softly. Admiral, their most advanced weapons are toys compared to what even a single scout vessel can deploy. Our systems could neutralize their entire planet's arsenal before breakfast. The council chamber filled with smug nods and satisfied expressions. They were in agreement. The humans were of no threat. A backwater species with barely controlled instincts and shiny fireworks. Amusing, perhaps, but utterly beneath serious concern. Grand Archon Tix finally raised himself fully, indicating that the matter had moved from amusing to worthy of closure. All in favor of formal classification and dispatching a scout fleet? The vote was unanimous, not a single dissent. It wasn't even a debate. It was a formality, paperwork in the form of galactic governance. Cora turned to the assembly one last time. Excellent. I'll dispatch Scout Fleet Beta immediately. If nothing else, their report will provide us with entertainment. As the chamber emptied, Cora stood alone on the podium, eyes fixed on the projection of Earth. Another species to be filed, used, and forgotten. Another blip in the endless tapestry of galactic dominance. And yet, something about this one lingered in her mind. A faint flicker of curiosity, quickly extinguished. She turned and left the chamber, unaware that what she had just set in motion would change the fate of the entire Confederation. Because Earth wasn't what it seemed. The cold void of space rippled with unnatural silence as Scout Fleet Beta emerged from quantum transit at the edge of Earth's solar system. A total of 15 vessels, sleek, elegant, and radiating the subtle hum of superiority, drifted into formation, their hulls absorbing starlight as if even light itself was not permitted to touch Confederation technology. These ships had crossed thousands of light years in moments, bridging space with ease that civilizations like Earth could only dream of. On the bridge of the flagship Starweaver, Commander Lyra Phoenix hovered silently above the polished obsidian floor, her iridescent tentacles swaying lazily. Her voice came slow and unbothered. "Commence standard scanning procedures," she ordered, not bothering to look up from the translucent display before her. "And someone wake me if the locals do something more interesting than waving telescopes at us." Her officers chuckled, each one a veteran of similar operations, scouting missions to primitive worlds, cataloging their geological makeup, assessing whether their populations could be harvested or influenced. This was supposed to be routine, a quiet, predictable venture. Lieutenant Cook Stormchaser, a young reptiloid fresh from the Confederation Naval Academy, sat at his console toward the rear of the bridge. His talons tapped across the control surface as sensor data scrolled rapidly. Something strange blinked in the corner of his display. He frowned and leaned in. "Commander," he called, uncertain. "I'm detecting what appears to be an artificial structure in orbit around the fourth planet, Mars." Lyra didn't even glance over. "Their space presence is limited to low Earth orbit. Check your equipment." "I did," he said. "Multiple signatures, actually. Several objects are powering up, but they were inert moments ago. They looked like debris. The bridge dimmed as alarms flashed crimson across the command deck. Senior Officer Dex Moonrider, his scaled form suddenly illuminated by warning glyphs, snapped to attention. Energy spike, multiple targets activating, all around us. Lyra turned sharply. "Show me!" The main display lit up, and the sight that greeted the crew was impossible. The debris field around Mars had come to life. What once looked like tumbling rock and scrap metal now revealed itself as a network of concealed defense platforms. Armored hatches unfolded like the petals of a blooming flower, revealing weapons systems that should have been impossible for a species still reliant on fossil fuels. Rail cannons hummed to life, energy lances charged. Lyra's voice dropped to a whisper. Impossible. The communication officer, Rena Sunweaver, her crystalline form shivering with tension, called out, "Incoming transmission." A human face appeared on the screen. Stern, controlled, male. He wore a dark uniform lined with rank insignia and the crest of the Earth Defense Force. "This is Admiral Jack Hawthorne," he said. "You have entered restricted space. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded, or we will open fire." The silence on the Star Weaver's bridge was deafening. Lyra's voice came tight and venomous. "How dare you threaten a Confederation vessel? We are here to—" She never finished the sentence. A beam of blinding energy tore across the void, slicing through the Star Weaver's shields like paper. The entire vessel shuddered. Systems began failing. Sparks erupted from multiple consoles. Sirens blared. "Hull breach on decks 3 through 7, someone shouted. "They hit us with one shot," Dex growled, stunned. "Our shields didn't even register resistance." "Launch fighters!" Lyra barked, stumbling to her command chair. "Overwhelm them!" The fighter bays opened, releasing a swarm of sleek Confederation interceptors, advanced, agile, and deadly. Within moments, Earth's own interceptors emerged from the darkness. Smaller, rougher, but impossibly fast. They danced through space with movements that defied G-force tolerances. In less than a minute, the human fighters tore through the entire Confederation squadron. Their movements were coordinated, graceful, predatory. "This can't be happening," Lyra muttered, watching dot after dot disappear from the tactical map. Then came the next surprise. "Multiple missile launches detected," Dex shouted. "But the energy signatures, these aren't like anything in our database." "Evasive action," Lyra shrieked. Too late. The missiles arced in from multiple vectors, spiraling past the Star Weaver's remaining defenses like sharks closing in on a bleeding swimmer. They struck with calculated precision. The deck buckled. Explosions tore through bulkheads. Pressure alarms wailed. "Communications are down!" Rena shouted, her crystal form visibly cracking. "We're being jammed!" "Activate emergency stasis protocols!" Lyra screamed as consoles around her exploded in showers of sparks. The floor caved beneath 2 officers. She barely managed to strap into her crash harness before the darkness swallowed her. The last thing she saw was a fleet of human warships, dozens, emerging from what the Confederation had believed to be floating rock and harmless satellites. They hadn't just stumbled into a human defense system. They had triggered a trap. Across the rest of Scout Fleet Beta, the chaos mirrored that aboard the Star Weaver. One by one, the 15 advanced vessels were engaged and obliterated. Human technology had leapt forward under the radar, completely concealed beneath layers of primitive appearances. What they revealed now was terrifying. In the command center of Phobos Base, deep beneath the surface of Mars's smallest moon, Admiral Hawthorne observed the unfolding operation with grim composure. Dozens of human crew members worked in concert, their fingers dancing over consoles, relaying information, coordinating assaults, managing casualties. "Message to all units," Hawthorne said calmly, his voice echoing over encrypted comms. "Good work. Begin cleanup and retrieval. Get those ships to analysis labs before their friends come looking." He turned to his second-in-command, Colonel Maya Chen, a stern woman with a combat-worn demeanor and a tactical mind few dared challenge. "They took the bait," he said. Chen nodded and brought up a map of the solar system, overlaid with hundreds of defensive points, hidden satellites, stealth stations, mobile launch platforms tucked in lunar craters and asteroids. "I almost feel bad for them," she said. "Almost," Hawthorne replied, cracking a rare smile. "We've been watching the Confederation for decades, observing how they treat so-called primitive species. Better they learn now. Appearances can be deceiving." Across the solar system, recovery crews moved in. Shattered Confederation ships were dissected, their data cores extracted, their technology cataloged. For all their superiority, the aliens had walked blindly into a trap designed not just to destroy, but to expose. The humans had been preparing for this moment for years. Back in the Grand Council chamber, light flickered wildly on the obsidian walls. Commander Cora Nexus stood still, her crystalline form trembling with restrained fury. Reports streamed across the display in front of her. Emergency transmissions, fragmented data from Scout Fleet Beta, then silence. 15 ships gone, no survivors, no return signal. Her voice cracked like a whip. "What do you mean, no quantum signatures? Ships don't just disappear." Admiral Shadowblade's projection flickered into view. "Their trails end at the system's edge. It's as if something blocked our detection." "Blocked?" she hissed. "Their tech? It shouldn't be possible," he admitted. Vex Starweaver's form shifted in alarm. "Then we must send a full battle fleet. Show these creatures." But an alarm cut him off. A holographic map filled the air. Confederation space, littered with red alerts, quantum breaches, attacks, sabotage. "What is this?" Cora barked. Shadowblade leaned forward, his cybernetic eye whirring. Multiple incursions, across dozens of worlds, communications relays destroyed, mining operations sabotaged. Outposts gone dark, all within the last 6 hours. "This is coordinated," Cora whispered, ice forming in her chest. "It's not retaliation, it's a campaign." More updates flashed. Human strike teams, quantum invisible ships, surgical precision, every target, command centers, defense nodes, supply chains, hit and gone before anyone could respond. The scout fleet wasn't the attack, it was the warning shot, and the Confederation hadn't listened. In the obsidian-walled Grand Council chamber, fear had replaced arrogance. For the first time in centuries, the leaders of the Galactic Confederation, an interstellar authority that governed with supreme confidence, sat paralyzed, their forms flickering and dimming under the glow of red alert holograms. The symbols floating above their heads no longer danced with elegance or pride. Instead, they blinked, shrieked, and pulsed in urgent chaos. Supreme Commander Cora Nexus stood motionless in the center of it all. Her crystalline exoskeleton, usually refracting light in soothing geometric beauty, now vibrated with visible fractures. She stared at the incomprehensible tactical map that had just filled the chamber's center console. It showed dozens of red breaches, all within Confederation-controlled sectors, all simultaneous. "This is a coordinated assault," she whispered, voice brittle. "They're dismantling us," Grand Archon Tix Brightheart muttered, his serpentine body tightly coiled in unease. Piece by piece. Admiral Rex Shadowblade, projected live from the 3rd Fleet command ship, stood rigid. His cybernetic eye spun furiously as new information scrolled across his display. "We're detecting quantum breaches across all major sectors, outer rim, core systems, even the capital perimeter." "Impossible!" Cora snapped, eyes flaring. "They don't have the technology. Our quantum detection system should have—" "They didn't see it coming either," Shadowblade interrupted grimly. "We underestimated them. Every single assumption we made was wrong." The council was falling apart. The same officials who'd laughed at the idea of Earth being more than a labor planet now panicked, their bodies trembling, warbling, or sparking with fear in their respective forms. Vex Starweaver was reduced to a half-liquefied puddle of luminescent jelly, stammering nonsense. Zara Quicksilver tried to speak, but could barely formulate coherent thoughts over the constant shrieking of proximity alerts and breach reports. And then, as if the moment needed a final nail of disbelief, the central chamber darkened. Every hologram blinked once, then went black. A heartbeat of silence. Then, without warning, every screen came to life, not with another alert, but with the face of a human. Admiral Jack Hawthorne. His image filled the council chamber, surrounded by cascading streams of alien text as the Confederation's firewalls failed to block him. He was calm, composed, and merciless. "We've had quantum communication capabilities for quite some time," Hawthorne said, his voice reverberating through every hidden speaker, every command feed. "We just decided it would be more educational to let you believe we hadn't." "You dare!" Cora started, but he cut her off. "For years, you watched us from afar, judged us by what you saw. Fossil fuels, territorial squabbles, outdated weapon systems, all real, but also all staged. You classified us as primitive, exploitable, harmless." He leaned slightly forward. "That was your first mistake." The council chamber fell so still it could have been a tomb. "You're not prepared for us," Hawthorne continued, "because your arrogance made sure you never considered we might be hiding our true strength. While you laughed at our pollution, we developed clean, antimatter-based propulsion. While you mocked our border disputes, we were conducting joint force warfare simulations. Every war you observed, every crisis you cataloged, they weren't weaknesses, they were exercises." The holographic war map behind him updated, exposing human strike fleets appearing across dozens of worlds, timing their attacks to perfection. These weren't blunt force invasions, they were surgical. Human units never stayed longer than needed. They struck, destabilized, and vanished without trace. Across Confederation territory, human special forces infiltrated key installations. Mining planets went dark. Trade routes were severed. Communications hubs were sliced off from the network. "How are they timing their jumps so perfectly?" Cora asked aloud, grasping at a rational explanation. "How can they predict our quantum lanes?" Admiral Shadowblade grimaced. "Because they've studied us. They've studied us for decades. They know every pattern, every weak point. And now they're inside the walls," Maya Chen's voice chimed in, Hawthorne's second in command. Her image appeared beside him, flanked by technical readouts that began populating across the Council's own systems. "You might be wondering how your own quantum communications are being used against you," she said, her tone clinical. "Turns out your technology has a fundamental design flaw, one we discovered a long time ago. You broadcast with directional precision, but the encryption protocols? Obsolete." Behind her, charts displayed reverse-engineered communication nodes the humans had intercepted, deconstructed, then mimicked. Now they were indistinguishable from native signals. They weren't just hacking the Confederation's systems. They were impersonating them, issuing false orders, falsifying fleet movements, and rendering defense networks useless. Vex Starweaver let out a gurgling moan. "You mean we're coordinating our defenses based on human-generated data?" "Yes," Chen replied without blinking. "For at least the last 9 hours, possibly longer." Counselor Zara Quicksilver slammed a clenched appendage against the console. "How many ships do you have? How many of your kind are out there?" Hawthorne's smile was brief, cold. "That's the thing. You'll never know. Our fleets are quantum stealthed. We've mapped your entire border defense network. Every time you attempt to regroup, we're already there, waiting." New holograms emerged, showing dozens of failed regrouping attempts. The Confederation's strategy was failing in real time. Every maneuver ended in ambush. Every stronghold fell silent within minutes of human contact. "You can't be everywhere at once," Cora insisted, voice sharp with disbelief. "But we don't have to be," Hawthorne said. "We just have to know where you're going, and be there first." The pattern became clear. Confederation warships would flee towards secure command nodes, only to find those nodes already destroyed. They'd attempt to engage human vessels, only to strike empty space. Even when they deployed planet-killer dreadnoughts, they found themselves firing at nothing or being destroyed by weapons they couldn't understand. Quantum phase shifting, Colonel Chen explained. Entire ships that no longer exist in the same frame of reference as your weapons. Your beams pass through us because we're not entirely here. Your kinetic weapons bounce off fields you can't even detect. The maps now highlighted key regions across Confederation territory that had been blacked out. Systems disabled so thoroughly they'd been rendered blind, all within hours. "This is a nightmare," Brightheart muttered, curling in on himself. "No," Hawthorne said flatly. "This is retribution." He stepped back, allowing the feed to zoom out, displaying the scale of Earth's hidden power. The supposedly scattered asteroid belts now revealed themselves as disguised shipyards. Civilian satellites were camouflaged orbital defense batteries. Hidden within the shadows of moons and gas giants, thousands of ships were now on the move. "Your entire military doctrine," Chen said, "was built around overwhelming force and assumption of superiority. You believed that technology was the only metric that mattered." "While we studied warfare," Hawthorne finished, "real warfare." On screen, Confederation fleets crumbled under invisible attacks. Human stealth vessels disrupted fuel lines. Commanders were assassinated by cloaked drop units. Communications blacked out. Logistics choked. Entire sectors falling. The Confederation wasn't just being attacked, it was being unraveled. In silence. In shadows. From within. In the core sectors of the Confederation, where bureaucracies reigned and military assets had long been considered untouchable, panic took hold. The attack on their sovereignty wasn't through brute force, it was through humiliation. The mightiest galactic empire had been played, fooled by a civilization they thought they could enslave. They called Earth primitive, and Earth used that label as a mask. At the core of it all stood Cora Nexus, once the voice of disdain, now the face of helpless fury. She ordered ships mobilized. She demanded full-scale retaliation. She screamed for explanations from her highest officers, but nothing worked. Every call to regroup was intercepted. Every rallying point turned into a trap. Shadowblade's projection blinked in again. "They're not just winning, they're erasing us." And for the first time, Supreme Commander Cora Nexus had no words, no commands, only silence. The silence after defeat is different from the silence before battle. It's heavier, full of regret, confusion, and an unbearable realization that something has shifted permanently. That's the silence that hung in the air over the Grand Council chamber, once the unshakable core of the Galactic Confederation's power. Supreme Commander Cora Nexus stood in the center again, but now she was cracked, literally. Her crystalline form, once gleaming and unblemished, now showed visible fissures from the strain of what she had witnessed. Gone was the smug detachment, replaced with barely restrained rage and a cold determination. Her fingers tapped the edge of the control dais with practiced calm, but her thoughts raced. She refused to believe that 15 Confederation ships could simply vanish, or worse, be destroyed by a species classified as primitive. They had underestimated Earth, gravely, but that mistake wouldn't be repeated. "All fleets are to mobilize," Cora commanded sharply across the emergency quantum band. Her voice boomed across galaxies through heavily encrypted channels. "Deploy battle-ready armadas. Engage full war doctrine. Bring the weight of the Confederation down on these imposters." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a declaration of war. Across the Confederation's sprawling reach, countless hangars, shipyards, and orbital fortresses erupted into activity. What had been decades of peacetime inertia now gave way to brutal efficiency. Flagships long kept in reserve were awakened. Planet killers that hadn't moved in centuries now powered up their antimatter cores. The mighty fleets of the Confederation were ready, not just to retaliate, but to obliterate. The plan was straightforward: strike hard, fast, and overwhelming. Earth wouldn't have time to regroup. Their sneak attacks would be crushed by the combined might of thousands of ships, vessels that had reduced civilizations to dust in past conflicts. Earth would become a warning to any other species harboring ideas of rebellion. It was meant to be decisive. It was meant to be final. But as they would soon learn, it would not be what they expected. In orbit around Earth, nothing stirred. As the Confederation's main fleets arrived in waves of shimmering quantum pulses, the first thing they noticed was the absence of resistance. No defense platforms lit up, no warships responded, no human vessels were in sight. It was quiet. Too quiet. Supreme Commander Cora Nexus, monitoring from her flagship Eclipse Ascendant, narrowed her eyes. "Full scan," she ordered. A beat passed. Then her sensor officer spoke. "We're detecting no major defenses, but we are reading gravitational anomalies near Jupiter." "What kind of anomalies?" Cora asked sharply. The chamber's walls flickered as the tactical map zoomed out to show Jupiter, the gas giant swirling peacefully in its place. But as their sensors zeroed in, the surface began to shimmer, like a mirage. Then it bent, warped, and peeled back like layers of fog. "What is this?" whispered Admiral Shadowblade, his image flickering into view again from another command carrier. As the illusion faded, the truth emerged. Jupiter had been turned into a weapon. Its upper atmosphere had been hollowed out. Buried within the planet's depths were massive hangars, concealed weapons platforms, and entire shipyards built within its many moons. What had looked like a chaotic natural phenomenon was, in fact, the largest military installation in known space. From those hidden depths emerged Earth's true military. 6 vessels exited Jupiter's great red spot like ancient gods from myth. They were immense, larger than anything the Confederation had ever constructed. Midnight black, absorbing all light, they didn't reflect so much as radiate presence. Their hulls seemed to distort the stars behind them. They weren't ships, they were dreadnoughts. The flagship was called the EDF Justice. Admiral Jack Hawthorne's voice followed its emergence, transmitting on every frequency. "Did you really think we'd defend Earth with decoys? Welcome to Project Zeus." More ships followed. Hundreds. Thousands. All emerging from the previously empty moons and asteroid belts of the Sol system. Some were docked within Saturn's rings. Others powered up from bases buried on Titan and Ganymede. Defense grids that hadn't appeared on any Confederation scan now lit up the sector like a swarm of hornets. And then came the worst of it. "You're now inside our quantum nullification field," Colonel Maya Chen's voice said flatly. "That means you can't leave." Back on Cora's ship, her crew scrambled. "We can't jump. Quantum drives are offline." "What?" Cora demanded. "Massive interference. The entire sector is laced with localized gravity wells. We're trapped." Cora didn't even blink. "Then we fight." She gave the order. Thousands of Confederation ships lit up the darkness with their firepower. Plasma cannons, gravity lances, neutron warheads, and quantum disruptors were unleashed in a single unified barrage. Enough power to vaporize moons and flatten planetary crusts. And yet, none of it hit. The blasts curved, bent, warped away from their targets. The dreadnoughts weren't even moving to dodge. They stood still, unbothered. "Gravity control technology has many applications," Chen's voice said again, almost amused. "One of which is redirecting energy fields. Your weapons simply can't travel in a straight line anymore." In that moment, for the first time, the Confederation realized the level of manipulation Earth had mastered. Space itself was no longer neutral, it was being controlled. And then Earth responded, The 6 Titan-class dreadnoughts aligned into formation. Energy built between them, not plasma, not radiation, but raw gravitational force. Fields spiraled into a perfect geometry of doom. The very fabric of reality screamed in protest. Admiral Hawthorne gave no speech. The weapons fired. A tear opened in space. A controlled artificial singularity, larger and more stable than anything the Confederation had seen, ripped outward and swallowed the front lines of the alien armada. 300 ships vanished in an instant. No wreckage, no energy signature, just gone. Like they had never existed. The quantum singularity cannon, Chen explained from the comms. Our prototype was used against your scout fleet. This is what happens when 6 of them are linked. Korra's ships reeled, crews panicked. Commanders screamed over jammed communication bands. Across multiple Confederation vessels, AI cores went dark trying to process what they were seeing. Physics had been rewritten. Then came the follow-up strike. Smaller human vessels, stealth ships, gravity skimmers, and wave jumpers descended from concealed locations, weaving through the chaos like vipers. They tore through weakened flanks, overloaded shield arrays, and boarded capital ships. Each move was precise. Each kill was surgical. "Fire everything!" Korra shouted. She launched every remaining weapon, every reserve, every drone, every automated defense in her fleet's arsenal. It didn't matter. Nothing landed. The battlefield itself had turned against them. On the EDF Justice, Admiral Hawthorne watched the slaughter with a steel-jawed expression. His hands were clasped behind his back. His officers operated with smooth, rehearsed rhythm. There was no chaos here, no shouting, no panic, just execution. He turned slightly toward Colonel Chen. "Status?" "Estimated 70% of their fleet is down," she replied. "The rest are trying to retreat, but our interdiction field has them boxed in. And the rail net they built across their border? We tapped it. Our teams are appearing at their fallback points even before they arrive. Time for the finale." Back on the Eclipse Ascendant, Korra saw it coming. A second singularity blast formed. This one larger, brighter, and faster. "No," she whispered. "Not like this." The weapon fired. Another wave of Confederation warships vanished into the dark. Those that survived were swallowed by gravity storms left behind, twisting pockets of space-time too unstable to escape. No one had predicted this. No one could have. It wasn't just technological superiority on display. It was strategy. It was years, decades of observation, deception, and preparation. Humanity had waited, watched, studied, and now they had struck. "Pull back to the core systems," Korra shouted, but her cry never reached the fleet. "They can't," Colonel Chen's voice echoed. "We replaced your quantum communication relays. Right now, human fleets are deploying through Confederation space, cutting off your escape routes one by one." Korra's image flickered as her own bridge began to break apart. The Justice loomed above her in silence. And then came a final transmission. Admiral Hawthorne. His tone wasn't cruel, but it wasn't sympathetic either. "We could have come in peace. We could have spoken as equals. But you judged us based on what we allowed you to see. You took what was meant to be a mask of restraint and mistook it for weakness." The transmission ended. So did Korra's ship. Supreme Commander Korra Nexus had endured many crises in her long career, but this was something else entirely. Her body, once a symbol of crystalline perfection, was now fractured and dulled, mirroring the shattered state of the Galactic Confederation's pride. She stood at the center of the Eclipse Ascendant's secondary command deck, surrounded by tactical officers scrambling to salvage what was left of her once mighty armada. Her voice remained steady, but just beneath its surface, even she could feel it. Panic. "This ends now," she declared over the emergency quantum band, her tone cold and final. "We're done reacting. We strike Earth directly. Hard. One last blow to bring them to their knees. Across what was left of the Confederation's chain of command, 3 of the largest remaining battle fleets rallied. 500 ships in total. Not scout vessels, not secondary task forces. These were frontline warships, dreadnoughts, and siege-class vessels with enough firepower to flatten entire planetary systems. They represented the best of what remained. The order was simple: jump directly to Earth, overwhelm its defenses, end this before more was lost. In truth, the Confederation had no better option. With communications collapsing, resources severed, and strongholds falling across multiple sectors, the window for decisive retaliation was closing. They had to act now, or not at all. The ships aligned in formation near a fringe world, engines humming with anticipation. Every commander on board knew this mission was desperate, but it was also their final chance to reclaim control. They believed Earth was stretched thin, spread out across the galaxy due to its sneak attacks. Surely, it couldn't have much left defending its home. Cora allowed herself one breath of satisfaction as the countdown reached 0. Then, in a burst of controlled energy, the fleet jumped. The transition through quantum space was flawless, less than a second of warp. And when the fleet reappeared in orbit over Earth, nothing. No defense platforms, no interceptors, no signs of resistance. Just open space, blue oceans, scattered satellites, and a ghostly quietness. It was almost underwhelming. "Where are their ships?" one officer muttered. "They must have moved them to the outer systems," another speculated. Cora's eyes narrowed. "Initiate full-spectrum scan. I want to know what's going on." Tactical stations on every vessel came alive. Scanners stretched across the electromagnetic spectrum, probing for life signs, hidden installations, cloaked ships, anything. Silence. Until... "Massive gravitational anomaly detected!" a voice yelled from the forward sensor station. Cora spun. "Where?" "Jupiter!" The holographic map shifted, zooming out rapidly across the solar system until the swirling form of Jupiter came into view. But something was off. The stormy gas layers weren't behaving normally. The cloud bands shimmered, bent, and twisted, like a visual glitch in reality. Then the planet pulsed. Not with energy, but with intent. The atmosphere peeled back. Not completely, but enough. Layers of gas dissipated like a curtain, revealing something buried beneath. Something impossible. Jupiter wasn't just a planet. It was a fortress. Across the Confederation fleet, command bridges exploded into chatter. Crew members blinked at their displays in disbelief. "I'm reading hangar bays inside the planet? There's no way that's natural." "Sir, those moons, they're arming themselves." Indeed, the once passive Galilean moons, Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto, flared with energy. They weren't just moons, they were stations. Their surfaces split open, revealing planetary rail cannons, long-range missile tubes, and pulse arrays powered by embedded antimatter cores. Cora's mind reeled. "You turned the largest planet in the solar system into a goddamn trap," she muttered. And then, a new presence made itself known. A ship, no, a shadow, emerged from Jupiter's great red spot. It was vast, unlike anything the Confederation had encountered, the EDF Justice. But this time, it wasn't alone. One after another, 5 more ships slid into view. Liberty, freedom, honor, courage, victory. Each one a floating fortress. Each one radiating power that made the Confederation's dreadnoughts look like relics from a forgotten era. Jack Hawthorne's voice filled the command channels again, clear and unhurried. "Welcome to Project Zeus," he said. "This is where we built our real military, while you were busy laughing at rocket launches." Colonel Chen followed. The moons, engineered from scratch, the storm systems, cloaking arrays, and the planet's gravity, redirected through lattice control fields, took us a while to perfect it. The silence that followed was deafening. Cora found her voice. Jump us out of here, anywhere. No can do, Chen replied calmly. You're inside our quantum nullification field, conventional engines only, and with your mass, you're not outrunning us. As if on cue, the 6 dreadnoughts activated, but not just weapons, entire sectors of space bent around them. The very void began to fold inward. The Confederation opened fire. Thousands of plasma bolts, gravity lances, and entropy beams lit up the void between fleets. It was all absorbed, bent away, redirected. Gravity control, Chen explained again. Corridors of null fire. Nothing can pass through unless we let it. Cora knew what was coming. Let them fire, Hawthorne said softly. The dreadnoughts waited, stoic and still. The Confederation's assault lasted 30 seconds. Then, Hawthorne's ships responded. The 6 vessels moved into a hexagonal formation, energy swirling between them. At first, it looked like a power exchange. Then it became clear. It was a weapon being assembled in real time. A single point of light formed in the center. It grew brighter, hotter, until even sensors couldn't read it anymore. This is the linked quantum singularity array, Hawthorne announced. First combat test. And it fired. It didn't explode. It erased. A wave of gravitational collapse spread across the battlefield. Confederation ships, hundreds of them, were consumed in an expanding sphere of spatial collapse. Structures folded, engines failed, crystalline hulls snapped under their own weight. Vessels weren't just destroyed, they were removed from existence. Those not caught in the initial blast found themselves surrounded. Human strike craft blinked in and out of reality, using microphase tech to avoid detection. Boardings began. Command decks were taken within seconds. Remaining crews were paralyzed, either from shock or resignation. This is no longer war, said Chen. This is a dismantling. Cora stood, motionless, watching her final fleet die not through bravery or resistance, but with quiet, terrified surrender. She had believed herself the apex of civilization. She had believed in the superiority of the Confederation. She had believed in the illusion of control. And she had never been more wrong. When it was over, only debris remained, and Earth's true fleet had barely taken a scratch. The 6 dreadnoughts reformed, scanning for stragglers. All that was left were disabled vessels and shattered remnants. Admiral Hawthorne's voice came one final time. You classified us as primitive, he said. We let you. Because arrogance is the most useful weapon in war, when it belongs to your enemy. Then, he cut the channel, and the dreadnoughts disappeared once again into the swirling mass of Jupiter's engineered atmosphere, vanishing without a trace, like shadows never meant to be seen. Back on Earth, the war room at Phobos Command was silent but active. Maya Chen stood beside Hawthorne as analysts replayed the footage in fragments, tracking gravitic flows, singularity pressures, and phase jump logs. How long before they retaliate? A young lieutenant asked. They won't, Chen replied. They just lost their leadership and their best fleets. The ones who survive won't be eager to provoke round 2. And the ones who don't? Someone asked. They'll be remembered, Hawthorne answered. As the warning. He turned back toward the massive holomap of the galaxy. Red indicators slowly disappeared, signaling the end of the largest single battle in Confederation history. Only now, Earth was the name that everyone would remember. The war was over. Not with a treaty signed on equal terms, not with negotiated peace under threat of mutual annihilation, but with the humiliating collapse of one of the oldest and most arrogant powers in the galaxy. 1 month had passed since the fall of Supreme Commander Cora Nexus's final fleet near Jupiter. 1 month since the 6 Titan-class human dreadnoughts obliterated 500 of the Confederation's finest warships without losing a single vessel of their own. 1 month since the myth of Earth's inferiority was shattered so thoroughly that not even the most delusional alien scholar dared speak of primitive humans again. Now, In the once imperial Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Confederation, the tables had turned, the roles reversed. The former conquerors sat in quiet rows beneath the watchful presence of Earth's leaders. Standing where Cora Nexus had once mocked Earth's petty border disputes and fossil fuel dependency, now stood Admiral Jack Hawthorne. His uniform was crisp, his presence unshaken. His voice didn't thunder, but it resonated clearly, precisely because it didn't need to. "The terms are simple," he said, surveying the council members, many of whom dared not meet his gaze. "Effective immediately, the Confederation will cease all operations involving the extraction of resources from pre-interstellar civilizations. You will release every world currently under exploitation, provide reparations, and acknowledge their sovereignty." High Minister Vex Starweaver, once a gelatinous beacon of haughty amusement, now trembled faintly. His once silver sheen faded to a pale gray. And our own worlds?" he asked meekly. Colonel Maya Chen, standing to Hawthorne's right, answered without hesitation. "Will remain your own. Humanity has no interest in conquest." A ripple of unease passed through the alien leaders. "No interest?" Grand Archon Tix Brightheart rasped. "Then why show this level of force?" "To remind you," Hawthorne replied, his gaze unblinking, "that power doesn't justify domination. Just because you can enslave someone doesn't mean you should." The chamber remained deathly quiet. Then, the new Supreme Commander of the Confederation, a tentacled being named Althus Keth, appointed after Cora Nexus's spectacular downfall, cleared his throat. "There is still the matter of classification. Humanity clearly can no longer be designated as Category 7. A murmur rose from the council members. The old system, built around technological achievement and perceived usefulness, had been Earth's prison. It had blinded the Confederation to everything that came next. But then Chen smiled, a sharp, knowing grin. "Oh, we'll keep the classification," she said casually. "Category 7 has served us quite well." "What?" Keth stammered. "But that would make you, on record, less advanced than dozens of species you've just conquered." "Exactly," Hawthorne said. "Perhaps the system itself needs rethinking, because if a Category 7 species just dismantled the greatest empire in galactic history, maybe your categories don't mean much after all." Laughter didn't follow. No one dared. Instead, there was reflection, understanding, even in some corners of the chamber, shame. Later, as the delegation left the council chamber, Hawthorne and Chen walked side by side through the capital's central promenade. Alien citizens watched from the shadows, unsure whether to bow, hide, or simply stare. "They still don't get it," Chen muttered, nodding toward a group of high-ranking officers who scurried away from their presence like frightened insects. "They will," Hawthorne replied. "Eventually." Chen looked up at the sky where the black silhouettes of Earth Defense Force ships hovered silently in low orbit like sentinels, unmoving, untouchable. "Was it all worth it?" she asked, softer now. "Decades of secrecy, staging conflicts, living under the eyes of an enemy pretending to be weaker than we really were?" Hawthorne smiled faintly. "My favorite part was how they monitored our border skirmishes, thinking we were playing at archaic war. Meanwhile, we were perfecting multi-front deployment tactics under their very noses." Chen chuckled. "Remember the drones they sent to spy on our military exercises? They thought they were watching tribes clash over oil fields. And what they actually saw," Hawthorne added, "was our Navy practicing coordinated assaults across atmospheric and orbital zones. Theater." "Good theater," she said with a wink. "Arrogance made them blind," he said. "But in the aftermath of victory, Earth didn't plant flags. There were no parades on alien soil, no monuments to their strength in conquered cities. What they left behind was far more haunting. Observation satellites, mobile peacekeeping ships, and military patrols stationed in orbit over key Confederation worlds. Not to rule, but to watch. to ensure they didn't try this again. Some Confederation officials grumbled about occupation, others whispered about revenge, but most knew deep down that this wasn't about vengeance. It was about accountability. And in that silence, amid the slow, reluctant compliance, something else took root: introspection. Species long considered inferior began to demand re-evaluation. Dozens of formerly colonized worlds filed for independence. Civil unrest bubbled within member systems of the Confederation, but not the chaotic kind. No, this unrest brought reform. A galaxy that had been locked into a centuries-long hierarchy of advanced versus primitive was being shaken free. And it was Earth, the supposedly savage, war-torn, fossil fuel-burning Earth, that had taught them the lesson. Admiral Hawthorne returned to Earth 3 weeks after the final peace accords were signed. He landed at a remote military base in the Alaskan tundra, where Project Zeus had first been conceptualized. The original command team was there, older now, some retired, but they saluted him all the same. In a quiet conference room overlooking the icy plains, he sat beside Colonel Chen and several of Earth's planetary defense leaders. There were no victory speeches, no champagne, just quiet reflection. "We won," someone said finally. Hawthorne nodded. "Yes, but not with violence." Chen raised an eyebrow. "You call a 6 Dreadnought singularity array not violent?" He smiled. "Okay, yes, with overwhelming force. But what I mean is, we didn't win because we wanted to destroy them. We won because we refused to become like them." Silence followed. It was true. At any point, Earth could have used its technology to conquer, to enslave, to retaliate for centuries of ridicule and planned exploitation. And yet, it chose instead to hold a mirror to the galaxy's face, to show them what they'd become, and what they feared they might be. The real lesson. In the end, this wasn't just a story about military strategy or technological innovation. It was a story about perception, about how easily we judge others based on what we choose to see. The Confederation saw Earth through a narrow lens, a planet struggling with division, pollution, war, and politics. They saw fossil fuels and failed diplomacy. They saw conflict and corruption, and they believed that these were signs of weakness. But what they failed to understand was that conflict doesn't always mean dysfunction. Sometimes it means growth. Where they saw disorder, they should have seen resilience. Where they saw outdated tech, they should have seen ingenuity. Where they saw division, they should have seen a people learning how to coexist. With pain, yes, but also with purpose. They thought humanity was primitive because they mistook compassion for naivety. Because they didn't understand that patience, humility, and even restraint, those are choices of the strong. Humanity could have built their fleet in public view. Instead, they built it underground. They could have shouted their progress across the stars. Instead, they waited in silence. And when the time came to act, they didn't flaunt their power. They revealed it only when necessary, not for glory, but for justice. From story to reality. There's something hauntingly familiar in this tale, isn't there? In our own world, nations have long underestimated one another, based on culture, on history, on appearance, or on outdated metrics of success. We look down on the poor because we measure wealth in dollars, not in strength of spirit. We scoff at tribal nations and indigenous peoples because they don't build skyscrapers, forgetting that they've preserved ecosystems we still fail to understand. We judge developing countries by their GDP, not their innovation, their music, their wisdom, or their capacity for endurance. Just like the Confederation, we're often too busy defining others to ask what we've missed in ourselves. We build classification systems, rankings, hierarchies. But sometimes, the quiet ones, the ones who don't show off, are the ones preparing for something bigger. Something that might change everything.